Welcome Annakuma crew. It is once again your favourite friendly despair bear Annakuma, and I am here today with a review video. We did it lads, we're back. Today we'll be talking about Bad Reaction Games' Grim Up North, a point-and-click adventure game set in Yorkshire that released in April of this year. This was the first of my demo reviews I did, and going back to look at the review, I was pretty excited for the full game, as the puzzles seemed fun and interesting, as well as the battle system, but I was a bit put off by the dialogue and the lack of character for Terry. So how did the full game compare? I guess to begin with, I should say that the demo does cover the beginning of the game. It starts with Andy the farmer seeing a UFO crash land on his lands, introduces us to the gameplay and the battle systems, because this does have, as I said, a Pokemon-like battle system to it. Also, it gave us the running joke of the aliens being Southerners, playing into that North-South divide rivalry in the UK, and then they throw us to Terry. If there was one thing I can say about Grim Up North, it is that it wears its influences on its sleeve proudly. They try to give a good nod to old British comedies that would centre around older people in the working class. I said in the demo review that the one tweet I saw that introduced me to the game stated open all hours as an influence, and that is made very clear with a tribute to the late great Ronnie Barker and his character Arkwright in that show. But it also sprinkles that sci-fi body horror of Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Terry is our main character. He's a grumpy old police detective, the senior detective at the station, that gets the call of his decade, telling him to go look into the case of missing villagers who would mysteriously come back a few days later acting very strange. Again, this is all in the demo. You have to remove some chavs from their natural habitat of terrorizing locals outside of a store. You get to meet their universe's Arkwright. You get into the pub and end up fighting a sentient toilet, and we're finally into the game as a whole. Sadly, in my opinion, it doesn't really get much better. In a way, the people of Grim Up North are kind of like Little Britain, if Little Britain wasn't offensive. It takes a lot of stereotypes of people you'd probably find in small villages in the UK, and then hit you over the head time and time again with that personality type, till the cows grow bored and leave the entire planet. Coming face to face with aliens doesn't really faze Terry, and after fighting the pub alien one more time, he's off to Garden Con, where he's once again met with the wonders of British village life, insults the young police officer again before breaking into Andy's home to learn the truth. I won't go more into the story. I don't want these reviews to really spoil the story of the games, and if that sounds underwhelming, or at least what I've said of the story so far sounds underwhelming, it might be because it is. Sadly, if I'm honest, the story is just fine. It isn't going to blow you away, but it also isn't awful. The one thing to remember though is that this is chapter 1, and it does end on a bit of a cliffhanger. I do hope they are able to bring out a second game, because without it, I feel the ending leaves an unfinished taste in the mouth. One of the reasons that is though is the main character. Terry isn't a bad character, but he is far away from a good one. As I said, the UK is full of old men sitcoms that range from cheeky chappies like Arkwright to miserable old men like Victor Meldrew.
I don't believe it!
Terry is a little bit of everything, and it doesn't really work. Whilst talking to the young police officer, he acts like Dennis Waterman's character in New Tricks, which technically is actually a police drama, not a comedy, though I guess it was a comedy at times. At other times though, Terry will act more like Ronnie Barker type of chappie, who tries to underhandedly insult people he feels he's cleverer than. Then his personality 180s to just outright rude and in your face like Victor Meldrew. Now, this isn't the end of the world. Not having a strong main character doesn't break a game. What can is when the main character doesn't necessarily feel like he cares about the story himself. Very often, it feels like Terry is forgetting the point of his investigation. I know this is just a hard thing to portray when you're trying to make funny moments, and it isn't meant to be a super serious story, but even by the end of the game, I just felt completely underwhelmed because Terry didn't seem to ever care, so he didn't have any real reactions to fighting morphing aliens. The thing that really kind of ruins the game for me though is the over-explained jokes and over-bloated dialogue. For me, the game stopped being funny the moment the demo cut out, and the main game started, and I spent most of my time wondering, who was this game even made for? As a Brit, I found myself explaining most of the game to my American viewers, and the small nods to things like Red Dwarf got a chuckle out of me. By the end of the game, I was fatigued by it, reminding us that it was indeed very British. A perfect example of it was the first puzzle out of the demo, which sees you interrogate a bunch of people in the pub. Each character has a bunch of dialogue that just goes on, and on, and on, and on, and on. Some of it can be fun, but that isn't the punchline. The conversation then goes on for another few minutes, leaving the joke long buried. Which is a shame, because underneath the blow, there is a lot of fun to be had, but by the end of the game, you're just happy people will stop talking to you and you can take a rest. It also suffers from its own influences. I get that they tried hard to bring someone like Arkwright to the game, but they lack the ability to write witty wordplays or insults hidden in dialogue to make it seem clever. The thing with these old comedies was that they were endearing no matter how horrible the main characters were. In its Grim Up North, there is nothing endearing about it or any of the characters, which is a shame. It isn't all doom and gloom though, because this is a video game after all. For me, the gameplay of its Grim Up North is actually pretty good, if a little stiff and a tad broken. All the puzzles feel very well crafted and follow a good logical path from beginning to end. The rap battle especially is one of my favourite moments and really felt like the writers had a chance to shine. It was also really well animated and one of the most snappy and witty parts of the game. Another really good puzzle was finding out just when Andy and his wife were married. It is seeded in little conversations you have with a few characters at GardenCon, and I saw it coming a mile off, but it still impressed me when I got to the point I needed it. It made me feel great that I had figured it out long before I knew it was something I needed to even figure out. Which is the thing with this game. You can figure out pretty much everything really easily, but it's the steps to get to that moment that can be very long-winded. Now, that sounded meaner than it needs to be because it isn't really long-winded. It's kind of like the Ace Attorney games, where you know what the 20-minute conversation is going to lead to, and sometimes you could be blind to the steps the game wants you to take because you know for sure what is coming, but it doesn't stop you feeling like a genius 20 minutes later when it's finally time to pull the smoking gun out. One thing is that sadly the final act is a little broken, or at least was when I streamed the game back in May. My two examples are, firstly, this generator thing here, that didn't let me do anything with it until I changed screens and went back to it to interact. It took me a while to realize the game had broken before I just left and came back to it. The other is when Andy fights the aliens in a flashback near the end of the game. If I defeat everyone but this one guy first, then the game just freezes and I had to alt-tab out and restart the game. Neither of these ruined the experience, and as a first attempt at point and click, this isn't a bad go. That being said, it does kind of feel unfinished, and I do wonder if the game was meant to be longer but got cut into two for some reason. The ending kind of being a very abrupt cliffhanger doesn't really help that feeling go away. It isn't a long game, and overall it isn't a bad game, but it is a hard one to recommend to people to play. I was kind of excited for the game after the demo, and I felt quite let down with the full game. That being said, I did have fun with the puzzles, and as a point-and-click game, it holds up really well gameplay-wise. It has a nice, unique inventory too, with it being the inside of Terry's coat. I talked about this a lot in the demo. I did love that look of the inventory, and whilst it did get very cluttered, it didn't feel too hard to understand what the game wanted. Or maybe it did. I remember having a lot of try everything with everything moments, but I'm sure I had usually missed something in the world rather than in the inventory at that point. Having a battle system in the game worked well as well. Having a battle system in the game worked really well. I said before that it breaks up the gameplay and gave the much needed urgency that the story really wasn't giving us. What I really loved about the battles though, and the number one reason I would actually recommend the game, is that the sprite work on the enemies and the music for those battles were fantastic. Overall, the artwork is fine. I hate saying that about art, but it was just fine. It was classic old school pixel style, and it works really well. But when you get into the battle, there is some amazingly detailed horror-based sprites that are just mind-blowing. It's one of the first things you'll come across in the game, but I really love the bus boss, which is hard to say. It just looks so yucky. It is so weird and creepy and really imaginative. Then the battle music hits in and has snippets of the wheels on the bus playing in the background. It works so well, and it's a shame it felt like they sped up the battles a little so that you couldn't really enjoy the animations as much. You also couldn't see what was happening, which was a bit of a problem. Things kind of flashed up on the side. I didn't understand what they were. You're not gonna have many problems though. Again, I was excited for the game after the demo, but I have to admit, I was disappointed with the end product. Most of the best parts of the game are in the demo, and after that I feel the story just stagnated, and we never got a payoff at the end. I'm not even an anti-cliffhanger person. I love a good cliffhanger, but it didn't feel worth it. It wasn't a good cliffhanger. For point-and-click fans, I would recommend it just for the puzzle experience. Personally for me though, the humor fell flat. The story was fine, the main character was all over the place, but it did look great. It was easy to get through, it isn't a long experience, and it isn't one that will stick with you, but it'll for sure teach you a lot about Maggie and her dreams of being a dancer. So sadly for this game, the demo promised a lot that the main game just couldn't give to us. But that is all we have time for today, Kuma Crew. I'm sorry the first review had to be a bit of a negative, but hopefully the next will live up to the lofty expectations of its demo. For the next time, we'll be looking at An English Haunting. Thank you as always for coming to watch. Feel free to subscribe, leave a comment and a like, and join me over at Twitch at twitch.tv/Annakuma, where we'll be probably in the middle of December right now. I am. It's fantastic. Until next time though, take care my friends, thank you, and bye bye.